Hey, and welcome into the Big Ten Huddle. I'm your host, JR, presented and brought to you by FanDuel. Appreciate having you here as we are going to do our transfer portal recaps for every single Big Ten team. And the first team we have up is the Iowa Hawkeyes, and we have here with us the one, the only, the Jeffrey the Greek. And Jeffrey, you do a Big Ten podcast over there at Eyes on Big Ten, but you also follow the Hawkeyes very closely. Tell people where they can find your Big Ten content at.
Yep, thanks for having me on, Jared. I am Jeffrey the Greek on Twitter. You can find the Eyes on Big podcast on Spotify, Apple, all those good things. We've been doing it since 2018. Started out with 14 teams. We've been doing it long enough. Now, of course, we're up to all 18 teams. And as far as breaking down the Iowa transfer portal, didn't know we were first. I'm laughing because we're not even 24 hours away from one of the most amazing runs in the history of college football, let alone the Big Ten and Indiana. I hope the numbers do well. I don't know how people are going to be jazzed to talk about Iowa's transfer portal after the amazing thing that we just witnessed last night in Miami.
Hey, Iowa's one of those teams that they do a great job of bringing in guys that are, have good production and stuff like that, kind of like Indiana does. It's a little bit different, but I'm excited to talk about Iowa because I feel like Kirk Ferentz has done a good job. Now, the players he brings in are normally younger. Cignetti seems to go after those kind of redshirt juniors, redshirt seniors and stuff like that. But Kirk Ferentz has found a good kind of hot spot here with what he's doing in the transfer portal. And I'm excited to talk through what some of these guys are. One of the bigger transfer portal classes I've ever seen from Iowa. 14 guys right now. On3 has the class set at 12th in the Big Ten, and 24/7 has it set at 16th in the Big Ten. But I don't think those rankings play out all that well with the impact that some of these guys might actually have on the roster here. So let's go ahead and look at the guys who were added first, Jeffrey, and talk about that strategy a little bit. Kirk Ferentz loves to go to the FCS. He loves to go to the group of five. Got a couple James Madison guys this time in the transfer portal. And like I said, they're younger. They normally come in with some production. They develop a little bit more. What are your thoughts on these younger guys from a lower level coming in and how they're going to translate to the Big Ten?
Yeah, you're right on. I'm basically just building on what you said there. I would say there have been times where Kirk Ferentz, and you got to give a shout out to Tyler Barnes as the GM that I think does a ton of this work. They'll go after a senior person if they think it's a person that fits into the culture. A lot of what Kirk Cinetti has had success with, and you hear him talking about, is the culture. There are similarities between Iowa and Indiana. If I'm being superficial, it's annoying how Indiana is basically doing what Kirk Ferentz does, but they were able to bring it up a notch, to be able to do what they did last night. But there are similarities there. What I would say is interesting about this class is what you already brought up, is the sheer size. We are sitting at 14 now, I believe. It is probably going to get up, almost for sure going to get up to 15, and I think possibly 16. And that's big. And I want to be delicate with how I word this, in that it is rare that you see Iowa take this many players in a portal class. I believe, for me, that is what KF would like. He would like most of the time that number is lower. And then a build onto that is, when they rank these transfer portal classes, by the way, the ranking of the transfer portal classes, I don't know how they come up with this stuff. Like, it completely needs to be revamped. Like, it's ridiculous. Mm-hmm. Like, I figured we hit on that. The other side is, I get this sense from college football fans that if you're not taking a giant class, are you even trying, bro? Like, build your team. I think there is, right? I think there is a situation where if you need to take 30 people in your class, something bigger is going on that probably, like, it's a major coaching change. There's a big exodus of players that want out. So, like, I don't want it to be a norm as an Iowa fan, but I think most fan bases should feel this way, that you have these huge classes. So do you understand where I'm coming from there? I don't know if you guys have ever.
I totally agree with you, man. Yeah. I said when we first started talking about the transfer portal that you have to take all of these rankings and ratings with a grain of salt. I do think it's interesting to look at some of the players, but overall, like, the players that are younger typically get favored more because of some of their development they can do a little bit. But the FCS players don't get enough credit. The G5 players typically don't get enough credit when they're coming into a program. And it's all about looking at your roster, saying, what do we need? And did you go out and get what you need? You can't do that with a ranking system hardly ever. And that's why I think it's so important for us to bring on guys like you to talk about, like, hey, we got LJ Phillips. We needed a running back. Hey, we got Tony Diaz. He was a wide receiver. The wide receiver room is, not super deep right now. We need guys like that, right?
Yeah, you're dead on there. And nobody ever really understands fit. You would have to have each journalist or whoever is ranking these things to like look deep into the program, each program, on what they're looking for to fit their system. Nobody is doing this. Nobody is going to ever do that. So like all of these rankings should be taken with a gigantic grain of salt. Now, transferring, going over to specifically to Iowa on what I see. Now, I want to be clear. I pay attention to this stuff, especially for Iowa. But to think that me or anybody else knows exactly how each one of these 14, 15 guys are going to fit into the Iowa football program, you're joking with yourself. Like it is always a projection. I just feel like I want to be honest with that. I have looked into these players. I could go into deep, dives into each player as far as like their film. How it's going to happen when they're going to look when they're at Iowa playing in the Big Ten. Nobody knows. We're going to discover that. The one thing I will say is that it seems to me that there's a little signal being put out with this class, as in there's always this rumor as far as when's KF gonna hang it up. He's getting up there in advancing years. This to me looks like a class that Tyler Barnes and Kirk Ferentz built to project out a year or two. These are a lot of younger players that they want to see on the roster, not just for the 2026 season, but 26, 27, and maybe even a little bit past that. So I think that is the biggest thing that is interesting about this class. Then the other thing that you look at, if you start breaking it down, it's, if you were fixing your team on the college football video game, you would essentially say, where am I lacking? And can I get these guys in the transfer portal to bolster? Pretty much Iowa fans knew. They looked at it and they're like, we need some help at safety and defense line. And we probably use a wide receiver or two. Well, what did Tyler Barnes hit? He hit all of those positions right there. So you immediately feel better, like, okay, we have a competition now at the D-line and safeties in order to pull out one or two guys that we think are going to be starters that can really help the team. Which one of those guys are they going to be? We don't know. I don't think anybody knows. That's to be determined. So you love that there is depth built there for D-line and deep. Specialists, we needed specialists. Looks like we got a kicker. We have a punter that's from really low D3. He I think will be a competition, and he was a D3 All-American, and I think that punter is one of the few things that I think if you could potentially punt great in D3 and then the NFL the next day. I don't think much changes there quite a bit, but keep an eye out. I think we have another Aussie punter that coming in that just has not cleared waivers, so to speak, before he's on campus. And then switching over to offense, not as many guys brought in, essentially one running back, one O-line, a couple wide receivers. But man, I got my eyes out on LJ Phillips from South Dakota. It just seems like that's a running back that is going to fit well with what Tim Lester does with the mid zone and running behind that Iowa offensive line.
Yeah, I love the addition of LJ Phillips. Was watching a little bit of his games, and he looks like he's going to fit right into this Iowa offense. I love that, Kamar Moulton's going to be there as well. I think that could be a really good two-back, kind of system with them and everything. We'll talk a little bit about the quarterback here later on, because I do think the quarterback choice between Jeremy Hecklinski and Hank Brown plays into that running game a lot, obviously, with Hecklinski and how mobile he is. But let's talk about some of these guys that left Iowa as well, because that's always the other side of the transfer portal, right? Is you bring guys in, but you also have a few guys that head out. And two of the biggest names that headed out for Iowa was Brian Allen, the defensive lineman, and Koen Entringer, the safety. You also lost Jazz Patterson, but I think you replaced him pretty well with LJ Phillips. I don't think that's a secret to anybody out there. What are your thoughts on losing Entringer, Allen, the other guys you lost to, and how Iowa might try to replace those guys?
Real quick mini rant this time. I try to do my best to say, when you lose players, it hurts. It just gets annoying when every time a player leaves, it's not just Iowa fans, it's Big Ten fans, it's college football fans across the board. We don't need that bum. Sometimes when you lose some of these players, it hurts, okay? So I'll save the one that hurts the most for last. Reese Dakin, our punter, Jazz Patterson, going to Michigan State. The biggest loss that Iowa had in the offseason was special teams coordinator LeVar going to Michigan State. So you kind of understand a little bit of that. I loved Jazz Patterson. He was a little bit buried on the depth chart, but I think he can be a good Big Ten running back. Reese Dakin kind of dropped off, but I've seen the talent. So, I do think those are two good football players that Michigan State got. The next one to talk about is Brian Allen going to Vanderbilt. Brian Allen was somebody that myself and many Iowa fans got really excited at snippets of his career. He would show flashes. I don't know every single detail of the story, but something was off. There just never was this connection between the Brian Allen potential and what you would expect as far as a day in, day out defensive lineman that they need in the Big Ten. I don't pretend to understand the details of that, but I think it's fair to say so none of those really surprised me, but I didn't like to see any of them go. The biggest one is obviously Koen Entringer. Obviously, Iowa has done an excellent job at developing safeties, corners, DBs across the board with Phil Parker. So that one stung, and it still stings for me. I don't know what the story is. I want to take something back that I put on Twitter that I'm wondering if it was a cash grab. I don't believe that's what it is. Something's up, okay? I don't know what it is that is up with the situation, but something has gone down there. I don't know what that is yet, but he will make Louisville fans happy pretty quickly because that is a solid football player.
Yeah, I was really surprised when I saw Entringer go into the portal. I thought maybe Michigan State or something like that. Maybe he just wanted to, go back home and maybe, with Fitzgerald and, his connection to Iowa, maybe something happened there and he just wanted to go play there. But then he went to Louisville and I was like, well, I have no idea what the story is here on this one. Iowa did bring in what's the safety? Is it Brown, Tyler Brown? The safety in there.
Xavier Styles, Anthony Hawkins, Tyler Brown, and we apparently have another safety, that just went on a visit or is going to visit soon. So if that doesn't signify that they wanted safety talent in to choose from, it seems pretty obvious to me.
Yeah, we're recording this late, kind of later in the afternoon, later close to the evening here on Tuesday. So we don't know if anything's going to happen with Cody Haddad by the time people are seeing this. But Cody Haddad coming from Ohio State on a visit. I believe he visited on Monday. We'll see what happens with the announcement there. He has a couple other visits, it sounds like. I think he might have been going to I don't want to say for sure because I don't remember exactly what they were, but I was always super high on Cody Haddad. As you know, I follow the Ohio State program very closely. His father was in the NFL, and I said from the very beginning, not even knowing if he was going to visit, I said he has to go to Iowa. If he's going anywhere, go to Iowa. He's going to turn. They're going to turn him into an NFL safety if he goes there, because I love the talent. I love the discipline. Doesn't have the best measurables in the world, but I think Iowa does a pretty good job of coaching guys up, even if they don't have the best measurables in the world, to say you're a good football player, you're going to play good football here. So if Haddad does make that decision to go to Iowa, I think that would be a huge boost for them in making that happen. So anything else on the departures? Yeah.
There isn't much. There really isn't much on the departures. You got to give KF and Tyler Barnes credit. They do a really good job with retention, and I think that is first and foremost KF having a culture where players like to stick around. Okay, I just don't know how that happens without that being the case. And Tyler Barnes doing an excellent job, not only communicating this through, but balancing the budget. Okay, because it's the reality of what sports is now. And I think that actually kind of plays into probably one of the next topics we have, which is quarterback.
Yeah, quarterback is the next topic. So you have the addition of Mark Gronowski last offseason, which was obviously huge. Everybody very excited about that. I still hold true to my statement that I made, which was if he went through spring, maybe they Iowa wins that game against Iowa State. And then I think Iowa should have been much more of a playoff contender if they did get that win. So obviously hurts to bring that one up again. Sorry, Iowa fans, but Mark Gronowski was fantastic this season. You really saw the development of a passer continue to improve throughout the season, his leadership, everything else. And this season you go from the winningest quarterback in college football history to now a brand new starter and either Hank Brown or Jeremy Hecklinski. Hank Brown did come in relief of Mark Gronowski in that Indiana game, but it sounds like Hecklinski, the transfer from Wake Forest, is really starting to make headway over there. And Iowa elects to not get a quarterback in the portal, maybe for financial reasons. Maybe they just really love those two guys and see which one happens. I mean, what are your thoughts on the quarterback position? Jeffrey not going after a quarterback in the portal. Do you think that was a mistake? Do you think you believe in these two guys? What are your thoughts?
Two things can be true at once, which is I do believe the roster management has a lot to do with the available funds. All right. I want to be clear with that. With that being said, even if you dropped a couple schmil, I don't think that, where suddenly Iowa has that cash and they can do what they want with it. I don't think they still would have gone after a top flight quarterback or a second tier down quarterback. In my opinion, that is because of the confidence they have in both quarterbacks, Jeremy Hecklinski and Hank Brown. So I think they like both quarterbacks. I would tell people, there was a day not that long ago where your quarterback on your roster, the quarterback that was going to be the starting quarterback for your team was on your roster. You recruited him and brought him in, and he was there. You didn't have to get a guy from the transfer portal to be considered an actual living, breathing college football program. So it is possible that it can go down like that. Okay, so Jeremy Hecklinski and Hank Brown, by the way, they're also transfers in, but they've been on the roster for a time enough where it seems like, they're old school recruits and whatnot. Hank Brown was there a little bit sooner and I think had a little bit of a lead in. He's a bigger quarterback, maybe a little bit bigger arm, but still kind of mobile. Jeremy Hecklinski, he's smaller. He's like a skinnier and not as jerky Diego Pavia, okay, as far as his skill set, but very, very quick feet. When I saw him get snaps late in the year, I was almost shocked how quickly he got out of the pocket and was able to pick up ground with his legs. So more athletic, still has a nice arm, maybe even possibly a little bit more accurate. So I hope it's a good battle. I agree that the word out is that Jeremy Hecklinski is the leader, but I think Tim Lester and KF, they're going to make it very clear that this is an open competition when they start talking about spring ball and that stuff starts coming out. So I hope they both battle. I hope they both, there's a winner, and I hope the other guy sticks around, although it's difficult this day and age that's the case.
Oh, and Iowa's got a good freshman quarterback coming in too. I don't think, I think Bessinger is his name. I don't think he's going to be in line to start or anything like that, but he's highly rated recruit coming in there to Iowa. I think the quarterback position for Iowa is looking pretty good for the next few years.
Yeah, Tim Lester has done the Lord's work in that QB room to get it from where it was when he got there to where it is now. And now he's starting to do work with the wide receiver room as well. I mean, you can almost make an argument that Tim Lester, even though he played quarterback in college, he's actually had just as much success with wide receivers and building those rooms up over the years. You mentioned Mark Gronowski. Yes, it would have been huge if Mark Gronowski could have been healthy in the spring, healthy all year. I think a loss or two probably gets moved over to a win for the Hawks if that's the case. I would also throw in the health of Reese Vanderzee. I was wrong when we heard about Reese Vanderzee having a freak injury right before the season started. I thought that the depth was good enough for wide receiver that we would be okay. I didn't give enough credence to Reese Vanderzee being special. Like, he has proved to be the number one receiver at Iowa. I think he would be one of the top wide receivers, in a lot of places, Ohio State and Oregon notwithstanding. So he needs to stay healthy as well. And then between some of the younger guys that are still on the roster that I was happy to see that they stuck around, and these other guys that we've brought in, Evan James and Tony Diaz, hopefully a couple of those guys can start building depth in the wide receiver room to help out either Hecklinski or Hank Brown.
Yeah, I think there's a lot more depth in that room with the addition of James and Diaz, and then you got Dayton Howard coming back as well. And I was so impressed with Reese Vanderzee in that Vanderbilt game. That catch he had for the touchdown was phenomenal, and really made me excited for what we're going to see out of him next year.
Yeah, he's not exactly Charlie Becker, but he definitely is a back shoulder throw demon and open, even though he's covered type of wide receiver. That's what it takes now in college football. You got to have those dudes, and you got to give them a chance to go up and make a play. Reese Vanderzee will get a ton of those balls moving forward.
Last thing I'll ask you on, and then we'll get out of here. Tight end, got a reliable tight end coming back as well. I think that's going to be really helpful for Hecklinski or Brown, whoever's the starter there. Correct me if I'm wrong. They did not get a tight end in the portal. What's your thoughts on tight end there, and what that's going to look like next season?
Yeah, obviously the tight ends at Iowa, legendary status, if you will. It took a step back the last couple years. I do think part of that is because of a little bit different philosophy, right? With Tim Lester as far as where we were at before. So I don't think you can discount that. But it was also just an exhaustion of upperclassmen tight ends mixed with an injury that all of a sudden kind of happened at once. Even Iowa tight end room is susceptible to, multiple facets like that happening. But now it seems to be getting built back up. So DJ Nami, high school quarterback, new to the position, what he was able to get figured out and improve upon as the year went on last year was pretty amazing. So that was great to see. We get a tight end back in Entringer that was hurt last year that should be back into the fold. And there is a couple younger guys that you need to keep an eye on in that tight end room that Iowa fans think are going to be excellent. So can't all play, all at once, but we do a lot of two tight end sets. So I don't think it's going to be quite the return to the Iowa tight end situation as we've seen at its height, with Noah Fant and I'm forgetting his name, but Minnesota Viking. I don't think we're going to quite see it at that level, but because we want to get the ball out to the wide receivers more, but it should be a good looking tight end room.
Yeah. Looking forward to seeing some more really good tight ends out of Iowa. You were right; it's not been quite what it was the past few years. So we'll see if can really come back there this season and show us some more. So Jeffrey, thank you so much for coming on. We appreciate you recapping the portal with us for the Iowa Hawkeyes. Everybody, go check out Jeffrey's content at Jeffrey the Greek on Twitter, all those places, and then Eyes on Big. Great content that he does over there with his gang of guys as well. So thanks for listening, everybody. Have a good one. We'll see you next time.